On the night of August 31st, 1888, a killer walked the fog-covered streets of London's Whitechapel district, murdered a woman in an alley, and vanished so completely that not one person was ever charged. Scotland Yard investigated for years. The case is still officially open, over 135 years later. That killer became known as Jack the Ripper, and is just the first name on a list of crimes so cold, so unresolved, that the people responsible may still be walking free today, or already died without ever facing a single consequence. Not every crime ends with an arrest. Some of history's most shocking cases, murders, heists, disappearances, were investigated for decades, chased by dedicated detectives, covered obsessively by the press, and still never solved. These are the crimes that got away. Between August and November 1888, at least 5 women were murdered in London's Whitechapel district, their bodies mutilated in a manner that shocked Victorian England and drew massive press coverage. Much of it sensationalized, some of it possibly even written by the killer himself in taunting letters sent to newspapers and police, one infamously signed Jack the Ripper. Scotland Yard investigated over 100 suspects, ranging from local butchers to, according to some theories, members of the royal family, though most historians now dismiss the more sensational theories as pure speculation. Forensic science at the time was decades away from anything that could reliably identify a killer from physical evidence. The case was never solved. To this day, authors, amateur detectives, and criminologists continue publishing new theories, and the Whitechapel murders remain the most famous unsolved case in criminal history. Between 1968 and 1969, a killer in Northern California murdered at least 5 confirmed victims, though he claimed responsibility for as many as 37 in taunting letters sent to newspapers, several containing encrypted ciphers he dared police to crack. One of those ciphers went unsolved for over 51 years until amateur codebreakers finally cracked it in 2020, and it revealed nothing that identified him, just a rambling message about the afterlife. Multiple suspects have been investigated over the decades, and in recent years a cold case team named a specific individual they believe matches physical and circumstantial evidence, though law enforcement has never filed formal charges, citing insufficient proof beyond reasonable doubt. The Zodiac killer was never arrested, never confirmed, and the case remains officially open with California authorities to this day. At least the Zodiac left behind letters. The next case on this list didn't even leave a body. On November 24, 1971, a man calling himself Dan Cooper boarded a commercial flight from Portland to Seattle, calmly told a flight attendant he had a bomb, and demanded $200,000 in cash and 4 parachutes upon landing. Authorities complied, releasing the passengers in Seattle, and the plane took off again with Cooper and a skeleton crew, per his demands. Somewhere over the dense forests of southern Washington state, Cooper opened the rear stairway of the Boeing 727 mid-flight and jumped out into a storm, wearing a business suit, with the ransom money strapped to his body, and was never seen again. The FBI investigated for 45 years, interviewing hundreds of suspects, before officially suspending the case in 2016 without ever identifying him. In 1980, a young boy found a small bundle of the ransom cash partially buried along a riverbank, the only physical trace of Cooper or the money ever recovered. In the early hours of March 18, 1990, 2 men dressed as police officers talked their way into the Isabella Stewart Gardner Museum in Boston, tied up the 2 night security guards, and spent 81 minutes cutting paintings out of their frames, including a Vermeer, several Rembrandts, and a Manet, together valued today at over $500 million, making it the largest art theft in history. The thieves left behind other valuable items that would have been easier to grab, leading investigators to believe they had a specific, informed target list. Despite a $10 million reward, one of the largest ever offered for stolen property, and decades of FBI investigation, none of the artwork has ever been recovered, and no one has ever been charged. Empty frames still hang in the museum today, exactly where the paintings once were, as a condition of the museum's founding trust that nothing in the collection be rearranged. A killer who vanished. A hijacker who disappeared mid-air. A heist that erased $500 million of art overnight. Some of the coldest cases in history involve crimes that were never even fully explained to begin with. Between 1968 and 1969, a killer in Glasgow, Scotland, met 3 women at a popular dance hall, walked them home, and murdered them, earning the nickname Bible John after a witness recalled him quoting scripture during the evening. A woman who shared a taxi with the killer and one of his victims later helped police create a widely circulated composite sketch, one of the most detailed of its era. Despite the sketch, mass public tip lines, and one of the largest manhunts in Scottish police history, no arrest was ever made. In 1996, investigators exhumed a suspect's grave to test DNA evidence, a rare and dramatic step, but the results were inconclusive. The case remains unsolved, and Bible John's true identity has never been confirmed. In the fall of 1982, 7 people in the Chicago area died after taking extra-strength Tylenol capsules that had been secretly laced with potassium cyanide. Investigators determined the tampering happened after the bottles reached store shelves, meaning someone purchased the bottles, injected them with poison, and returned them to different stores without ever being seen. The case triggered a nationwide panic and led directly to the tamper-proof packaging still used on medicine bottles today, a safety standard that exists specifically because of this case. Despite a massive FBI investigation and one prime suspect who was eventually convicted of extortion for trying to profit off the panic, no one has ever been formally charged with the actual poisonings. The case remains open more than 4 decades later. In February 1957, a young boy's body was discovered in a cardboard box in a wooded area outside Philadelphia. He had been badly malnourished and showed signs of abuse, but for 65 years, investigators couldn't even determine who he was, let alone who killed him, earning him the haunting nickname America's Unknown Child, and prompting police to add his case file to a national database that's normally reserved for missing persons, not victims. In 2022, advances in forensic genetic genealogy, the same technology used to catch the Golden State Killer, finally identified the boy as Joseph Augustus Sorelli. Investigators now know who he was for the first time in 65 years. But identifying the victim isn't the same as catching the person responsible. The person or people who killed him have still never been identified, and the case remains formally unsolved. Sometimes modern science finally answers half a mystery, but leaves the other half exactly where it started. On November 7, 1974, in London, a nanny named Sandra Rivet was beaten to death in the basement of a townhouse. The woman who lived there, Lady Lucan, was also attacked but survived, and told police her attacker was her own husband, Lord Lucan, a British aristocrat with gambling debts and a bitter, ongoing custody battle. That same night, Lord Lucan called his mother, dropped off his car at a friend's house nearly 70 miles away, and vanished completely. He was formally named as the suspect at a coroner's inquest, one of the last times English law allowed a living person to be named as a murderer without a criminal trial. He was never seen again. Over the following decades, there were reported sightings of him across 4 continents, none ever confirmed. He was legally declared dead in 1999, and again by the UK courts as recently as 2016 for the purpose of issuing a death certificate. But no body was ever found, no trial ever happened, and to this day, true crime investigators still debate whether he's actually dead at all, or whether an aristocrat with the right connections simply vanished and was never found because those connections made sure of it. Every case in this video shares something unsettling in common. Enough evidence to know a crime happened, and never quite enough to know who was truly responsible. Some killers left ciphers. Some left composite sketches. Some left nothing but an empty frame on a museum wall. And in every single case, whoever did it either died free, or may still be out there today. If Lord Lucan's decades-long disappearance is the case that's sticking with you, you'll want to see our next video, where we rank the most convincing suspect theories ever proposed for Jack the Ripper. Drop a comment. Which unsolved case in this video do you think will finally get answered next? Subscribe to the Paint It so you don't miss it.